In the name of Allah, and a blessing be upon the Prophet Muhammad.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.
مرحبا شيخ.
فضيلة الشيخ مرحبا بكم. السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. I will start, ladies and gentlemen, by introducing each speaker, and maybe I should introduce myself. My name is Nomanul. I'm Professor of Islamic Studies at the University of Wales in Lampeter, and I am a secondment to the University of Qatar in Faculty of Islamic Studies. I was asked to chair this meeting, and I feel overwhelmed really by the presence of such eminent scholars, which we have been discussing together since last 2 days, the topic of Islam and environment. A topic which really is of great importance to the entire civilization, not only to the Qatari Foundation, not only to Qatar as a state, not only to the Arabic world, not only to the Middle East, but the entire world. And today we have a rather selected speakers who will participate in giving us a further dimension for the topic of Islam and environment. Now, I'll start with Dr. Saif Ehajari, who is one of the outstanding figures to speak about, really. One of the founders of Qatar Foundations since 1995 until 2011. Deputy President of the Organization for the Friends of the Environment in Qatar. He's a graduate in hydrogeology in 1995, although it doesn't look that he's that old, but he's been holding all these positions and responsibilities. He had his PhD from South Carolina, and I'm really delighted to be able to present him to you to speak to us today about the consumerism tendency and from an ethical, environmental and ethical point of view. And we have other speakers which I'm going to struggle in summarizing their wonderful and extensive CVs, but I think I will not say more than that. I will ask Dr. Saif to start the ball running, and hopefully we'll assign for each speaker about 10 minutes, and then we'll move into discussion between them, and then we open the floor for further discussion. Thank you very much. Dr. Saif, it's your mic.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim.
In the name of Allah, and a blessing be upon Prophet Muhammad. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, this consumerism is a heated topic and of a significant importance, not on a specific area, but for the whole world, where the consumerism refers to the economical policies which focuses on the concept of consumerism, and it symbolizes the belief that the free choice of consumers should establish the economical well-being and structure of community. And this consumerism has a negative impact on the psychological well-being of individuals and on community, which is directly related to the man, and it also has a negative impact on the environment issues, whether the natural environment that God gave to us, and even this consumerism, frankly speaking, is an emerging power in the market which might harm the individual, the man, or the humans, and the market. and we need to limit this impact. And I have conducted a study that focused on 4 areas. These 4 areas play a role in if the man was able to tackle these areas in a balanced way and a logical way, he might achieve happiness in life and in the afterlife. And if not, there will be severe consequences not only for the current generation but for the coming generations. The first area, the relationship between individual and his creator, the creator who gave us all these blessings that are limited, and in order to build this conscience that realizes such a bliss, such a blisses, is a way in order to find a way out of this predicament, because the man in need for this great relationship with the creator, and Islam, of course, and other religions has focused on this aspect, because if we look to the past, the prophets did not come to talk about chemistry and technology. They came to talk about values and ethics, which benefit and best use the resources and technology and put them on the right track. And if the man loses values, he will not use the knowledge and in the right way. And the proof on this, if we look to the nations where the civilization, once they lost the values, they disappeared. And we can also measure this. The civilizations that had ethics and values, once they lose these critics, they start to suffer from many issues. And even the big civilization, all the prophets since Adam till Prophet Muhammad, they came in order to build this set of values that make the man balanced with he treats his surroundings. And the second relationship, which is the relationship between one man with another, and if this relationship was not a healthy one, the environment will also suffer. The relationship with the social relationship between humans, and also to feel the others wherever they are. So this is an ethical issue that we need to look to it from a certain perspective. And consumerism have an impact on the human relations to each other. And now we can note and we can see that some kids that cannot find a piece of bread to and other people throw large amounts of food. So this relationship, it is a human relationship, is the core of this issue. And the more consumerism, the more the negative impact on this aspect, the relationship between people. The third relationship, which is the relationship with other organisms, with other living organisms. And this relationship is also of a great important and critical, because these living organisms that are diversified, and there are different forms of creatures, and this is also a blessing for all humans. And if we treated these creatures and these organisms wisely, life will continue. But now, unfortunately, we see many plants distinct, and also animals. So also here we note that the consumerism of today's consumerism, which we hear about from different conferences, like even the CAB. They are not only talking about in the environment, but also they are talking about economy, because the economy has a major impact on environment. So a balance is needed, and sustainable development is also required. We need only to use the necessary resources so that the environment can sustain and can continue. Hence, we note that the consumerism communities, the people are tensed and they live unhealthy relationship.
Therefore, we noticed at the present that during this period, because of lack of appreciation of the needs of the environment and the ability to shoulder the responsibilities of human activities, the human activities are exceeding the bounds and putting heavy pressure on the environment. And as a result of this consumption, this constant consumption, which has no limits, we begin to feel the deficiency of resources or the extinction of some of these creatures, actually, and living organisms. And we noticed from the verse in the Quran that shows that what happens in this nature is always to a measure and in a balance. Therefore, there is nothing that's greater than that's what's required. So we notice that these societies actually provide, actually characterized by a lot of this suffering, and there is no solution for this problem except through the creation of balanced relationships with these living organisms. And fourth, the relation with the non-living components, inanimate components in the environment, and this relation is governed by balance again, dealing with them without any waste, extravagance, or prodigality, that the balanced man should actually use a moderate measure of these resources. And this balance actually is the hallmark of all ecosystems. And we find this kind of balance, prevalent balance in all ecosystems. And if there's any imbalance, then we begin to see problems. And the sustainable development, which actually makes it necessary to deal with the components and the ingredients of the environment in a clean planet that's full of resources. And the sustainable development actually is characterized by the right to exploit, make use of the resources. Every country has got its sovereignty to use its resources, but also it should look at the rights of the others as well, within the country or in relations with other countries, since these bounties are right for everybody, not owned by one particular nation, and affect any activity, could have a comprehensive impact. And so they could be local in the locality, but also have a widespread and universal impact. Man, in a study done by the American University, shows 50% of the damage to the human ecosystem is caused by human beings. We note also that in nature there are natural disasters, of course, but this actually constitutes only 5% of the harms and the damages that occur to the environment. So man actually shoulders the responsibility, the greater responsibility for the damage and harm that comes to this planet. And we hope the future generation will be spared that. 5%, the nature can deal with natural disasters. We know that this land, a lot of construction and demolition to achieve the desirable form that we can witness now. So the ability to rehabilitate, to reform nature, while man needs a lot of effort and a lot of resources in order to achieve this kind of objective, which might not be achievable and might not be actually make right what has been damaged if this should this harm continue. And that's what we're witnessing now in the global, in the warming greenhouse effect, and we might reach a point of no return for those in terms of those issues that affect the environment. The last relation I want to talk about is the relation between man and the human heritage. Man has gone through lots of relations through the former generations, and undoubtedly there have been successful experiences and failing ones, but this relation should be, man should benefit from all those successful relations in relation to this issue, namely the unjustifiable consumption, and this actually accumulation of civilizational or heritage should be made use of. Finally, it's important the economic development should achieve the highest, humanistic objective, which takes into account the essential needs of mankind, and also the emphasizing the mutual relations and the strong and balanced relations between economic development, social development, and human development, as well as environmental development. In addition, the economic development should actually look at man as the end for these relations, and it's important, finally, that the economic development should actually address this consumerism, and this is a noble human mission, the serving human. Thank you very much for your attention. Shukran. Now, the Dr. Saif presentation was very effective and give us another dimension, actually, of this issue, the environment issue, namely the practical one. And we now listen to another perspective we've been talking about all day, as I mentioned a short while ago. There's Professor Nomanul. As we say, said in saying goes in English, some people are wise, and when you talk about
now, we as a human being would tend up to be otherwise when we are dealing with the environment. Now, I'll leave the mic to Professor Nomanul, who's one of the outstanding academics on that field. We haven't met before, but we've been communicating through our publications. He's advisor, professor of social sciences of liberal art program, Institute of Business Administration in Karachi. Hold a faculty appointment at the University of Pennsylvania. Chief editor for the Studies in Islamic Philosophy, Oxford University Press. And please start, Dr. Noman.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I think I should perhaps begin with the principle in the natural sciences. There's a principle called the principle of parsimony, and that means that theory which explains something by one principle is better than that which explains the same phenomenon by 10 principles. That is called the principle of parsimony, and in theory choice, when you have competing theories, this really is an important consideration as to which theory is preferable over the other. This is the principle of parsimony, and it is said that Einstein was once found that he has a single soap, and he would shave with that soap, and he would wash his hair with the same soap and wash his body with the same soap. And somebody asked him, Albert, why do you use the same soap for all these activities? And he said, this is the principle of parsimony. And indeed, I don't want to go into the details of his theory, but the general theory of relativity indeed is an embodiment of the principle of parsimony. Einstein changed the geometry rather than postulating new forces. And I think that this principle in the natural sciences really apply to social life as well. What is the meaning of consumerism? The idea that the purchase of goods and services in ever greater amounts is good for us. It is good for people to spend a lot of money on goods and services. Now, when we acquire things, buy services and buy goods and buy commodities without pause. And this is the central principle for me, that this whole notion of pause. Without pausing, without thinking about the process through which that commodity, that item has reached us, that human population that has produced it. If we have no consideration for that, if we don't consider the land in which, let us say, if we buy a cotton shirt, where is that cotton grown and what is the condition of that land, what happened to the water resources, and then of course the question of waste. Remember that the human community, from the point of view of environment, is a single community. The environment doesn't know the difference between political boundaries. The environment never created political boundaries. We did create political boundaries. So that does not know. So one action in Doha will affect people all around. And if we are neighbor blind, and by neighbor here I don't only mean the human community, but also the non-human community, the birds and the flowers and the plants and the rivers and the mountains, all those things. If we are blind to them, then I think that purely from the point of view of conscience, I'm operating in the ethical framework before I go to the environmental issue. Purely from the point of view of our conscience, it must pinch our conscience. I have lived a long time in America, a country which is as you know, very well off, a wealthy country. These days, as Dr. Izzuddin told you, I'm in Pakistan, which is not very far from here. And I cannot tell you what severe energy crisis they're going through. The streets are dark. Sometimes there is no gas to cook, and there is no electricity, and it can be very, very, very hot in the summer. It is brutal, and people go through that brutality every day. People die. And if we are oblivious to that, there is something wrong in our conscience, and I'm simply appealing to that. I mean, if I speak in an Islamic framework, you know that the life of the Prophet, upon whom be peace, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, his life is a model for Muslims, and we don't see the frivolity of acquisition in his life. And one notion of the Quran that I have invoked many times, many things have been mentioned by Dr. Ehajari from the Quran, very pertinent ayahs that he presented in his talk. But I often talk about this notion of self-injury, zulmun nafs, harming oneself. And I consider it to be a central ethical principle of the Quran, that ultimately what we are doing is going to harm us. So for our own purposes, it is going to be bad for us. So really, I mean, if I'm pressed, then I will make it a pragmatic argument, that it is not simply a moral argument, an ethical argument, but this is also a pragmatic argument. It is going to harm us. It is going to hinder in the achievement of the purpose for which we want to have luxurious lives. You open your wardrobe and you find 500 shirts, and you find bags which have not even been opened, or shoes which have never been worn, and all of a sudden you realize that you bought those pair of shoes about a year ago, and then you throw them away. This kind of demand, which is a result of shared desire, uncontrollable desire, unreflective desire, without scruples. I don't want to use morally charged words such as greed. Let's leave that alone. This is a judgmental term, but anyway, uncontrollable, unreflective desire without moral scruples. Now, this is the situation where more demand will create will lead to more production, and more production will lead to. Let me just turn this on, and then because I have to read something to you. I'm sure I made a mistake. Just please allow me. It just slept. Yeah. yeah, I have it in front of me. Yes, I was saying that more blind demand will lead and does lead to more production, and more production leads to more profiteering, and of course, you know, the finite energy resources, the consumption of resources, they rise. Let me tell you this, that between 1950 and 2005, worldwide metal production grew six-fold, 6 times. Oil consumption 8-fold, and natural gas consumption 14-fold. In total, about 50% more resources are now extracted annually than just 30 years ago. Average American uses some 88 kilograms of resources daily, more than twice the average European. But if you may allow me this courage, let me tell you that in the world ranking of per capita greenhouse gas emissions, based on the data of the year 2000, Qatar was number 1, UAE second, and the USA was 6th. Qatar was number 1, and ironically, it is Qatar where the second phase of the Kyoto Protocol was signed. Kyoto Protocol legally binding countries to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. It was signed here, and it is number 1. One of the issues here is the imitation of the lifestyle of industrialized countries in the developing world, and that has, even though you know, economic development strategies have been successful in boosting growth and alleviating poverty, they have given rise to second-generation problems. And the environmental issue is one of the central second-generation problem, and we are in potential danger. You know, the use of energy, blind use of energy, and disregard for our neighbors is ultimately going to recoil back upon us. I mean, the moral question aside, I think that moral question should be sufficient for us to reconsider our behavior. But if we need something practical, something pragmatic, something real, then we must realize that the resources of our world are finite, and we are moving in a direction where ultimately our excesses are going to recoil back upon us. And this is what I want to present to you. I only have 10 minutes, so I think that I'll just leave you here, and you know, once we get into the question and answer session, maybe you could provoke me to say more. I'm very much looking forward to Sheikh Qaradaghi for his final remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Nomanul. One of the statements that stuck to my mind, believe it or not, came from a character in a film called Star Wars. And the person who said that is Yoda, who said, ignorance leads to animosity, and animosity leads to violence. And violence is a double-edged sword that can cut both sides. And this is exactly our situation with the environment. And Dr. Richard Shaw will speak to us from a wise, scientific point of view. Because Dr. Richard is a person who is a scientist who's been involved with the environment for a very long time. And I'm going to read you his CV in Arabic, just to test the translators, who's been tormenting me all the day. Richard H. Shaw, البيانات الشخصية.
Dr. Richard H. Shaw, he's British, his current position, the regional coordinator for Invasives in Europe and the Americas. And he's the deputy director of the CABI EUK. The principal areas of expertise: invasive species management, policy and practices, and Program and Project Development and Management. He has a PhD in Classic Biological Control of Weeds from London University, and he has an MCS in Applied Biology from Birkbeck College, University of London, and he has also a zoology degree from the University College London. Dr. Shaw, please, the floor is yours.
Impeccable translation. Thank you very much, Professor Chair, and thank you very much to CILE for allowing me to be here and this opportunity to speak to you about a subject that is close to my heart. And I would say this is now for something completely different. This is me using an example of an environmental consequence that is associated with consumerism to provide some challenges for people to consider when they look at the ethical and religious and guidance issues that arise with environmental issues. Make sure I get this right. There we are. So what I'm going to do is explain to you what invasive species are, and this is probably completely new to many people in this room because your environment is not such that it would be susceptible to a lot of invasion, but the rest of the world really very much is. So this will be of interest to you, I hope. I'll try and prove to you that they really are very bad, which I'm pretty sure I can, and then we'll talk about where they come from and what's driving the change, and then we'll talk about the dealer, the supplier of this thing, which is the trade and commercial side of things, the customer's attitude, because there are two parties, it takes two to tango in this particular relationship, and then the implications, the ethical implications of the issues that arise through invasive species. To convince you that they're very bad, you won't, I suspect not many people will know this, but invasive species are the second biggest driver of biodiversity loss around the world, next to habitat destruction. That's pretty remarkable. So these things are really making a big change in biodiversity around the globe. And they are the key factor in 54% of known extinctions. So these are serious players. And the costs are astronomical, $1.4 trillion per year in damage and control costs. These are figures that make world leaders look up, I think. So this is an important issue. And the interesting thing about them is they come from all taxa. You can't just say, well, you know, these particular reptiles are really bad, we should do something about reptiles. Every classical taxon is covered as an invasive species. There are examples all over the world of everything: birds, fish, amphibians, this will challenge them, invertebrates, reptiles, plants, everything, viruses, and not just human health. These are environmental issues. They can be very beautiful, which is why they spread so fast. This is lionfish. This beautiful fish, very dangerous fish, I must say, physically dangerous, is devouring everything in the Caribbean. It was introduced accidentally, escapes from ornamental ponds. This is causing a real problem in the Caribbean. Rhododendron ponticum in the UK, where I'm from, this is a threatened and endangered species where it comes from, but is an invasive disaster where it's arrived. That's an interesting thing to talk about at the end of this, the value of species, which I'll come to later. This is another weed. This is a river, would you believe? But it's actually a plant from the Himalayas that's invaded a riverbank in the UK. If we look at ecosystems, this particular picture is a climax ecosystem in Australia. It's a eucalypt forest. They call them a forest. This is what you would imagine a climax community is like in Australia, not like we have in Europe. And it should be uninvadable. That's the theory. This is every little niche is filled and all the natural enemies are there and everything like that. But if you climb over the top of it, this is a rubber vine weed. This comes from Madagascar. Another thing, it's just a rye, beautiful plant, amazing flower, and it can cover, this covered 40,000 square kilometers of forest in Australia. That's the size of Britain, nearly. So these are astronomical invasions. And the costs are very high. This is the cost of removing, well, this is one plant, water hyacinth, which comes from South America. It arrived in Europe as an ornamental plant. You can still buy it all over Europe. But once it gets into a river system, it spreads and covers the whole river system and prevents access to water and decreases the oxygen content. The fish have a problem. The implications roll on and on. But the most amazing thing is the cost. They spent 23 million euros pulling this out of one river in one country in Europe. And that won't work. This is going to come back and they'll have to do it again. And they've given up now and walked away. So the figures are very high. My particular favorite, Japanese knotweed, I've spent most of my life working on this particular plant. The most impressive part of this is it actually breaks into people's homes. So this is an Englishman's home is his castle. This thing can come into your home. So this is breaking a boundary that no one accepts. So this plant has a very artificially high fear factor in Europe and America. It's a big issue in America. But the real impacts are on species extinction. This is the introduction of the brown tree snake into Guam, one of the American island in the, I'm not sure which ocean it's in, but this tree snake has arrived and it's basically wiped out most of the birds in there. It was a pet which escaped from someone's collection, and it's wiped out 10 birds, that many lizards, but it also causes huge power outages. It climbs along the wires and then bridges the wire and it dies, but it locks the power out. So the implications are large. And most horrifically, this is the traditional thing you see, but these two species are not supposed to be together. That's what I'm trying to say here. And why is this happening? Well, global trade. We are entering what we cynically call the Hermogecene. Everything is the same. We're trying to have everything the same all over the world by trading all of these goods. Most of the things I've eaten, well, many of the things I've eaten in the 3 days I've been here are definitely not from this region. It's amazing what you can get. Kiwi juice, remarkable. But all of these things, 82% of invasive species in the study, a recent study, are introduced through trade, and that's not surprising. And where does the trade come from? The ones I'll focus on now: the pet trade, clearly, horticulture, and I mentioned zoos and botanical gardens, but I'll leave them out because they are pretty good. They're a source of a lot of invasions, but they're very responsible. And this is the main driver. This picture here is a garden center. This garden center could be anywhere in the world, literally anywhere in the world. Look at these species that are here. There's Middle Eastern species, South American species. This is in England, very close to where I live. It's madness. Do we really need to have these plants here, or what about the native ones? There aren't many native plants around Qatar, I've noticed as I've been wandering around. So where do people get their plants from? At the bottom here, garden centers, clearly, not surprising as I've just mentioned. Where do they get their information about the plants? The label that's on the plant and the garden center advice. So we've got a very narrow window. There's no independent suggestion, apart from if you see the words vigorous or reliable, that suggests it's going to be invasive. To me, I can translate that language. It's a bad thing, normally. Oh, sorry, I've skipped those two, I apologize. And what are the drivers for people to do it? Well, sometimes they're quite whimsical. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, people rushed out and wanted a Teenage Mutant, they didn't want a plastic one, they wanted a real one. So how can I get a real Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle? Well, what you do is you get a red-eared slider. So the US exported 52 million of these organisms in 8 years, in an 8-year period, whilst it was still all the craze. And this is an irresponsible thing to do because they grow and people have them in a small tank and they think, what can I do with this? I'll put it into the environment so it can live in the river. It'll be fine. So we throw it out and then this thing just eats everything in the river. So these things become invasive. And even when they set up, in France, they set up a reception area for these organisms to be looked after. Please if you don't want them, bring them here and we'll look after them. People arrived and they saw this concrete monstrosity of a holding area. And they stopped at the gate and then went to the river and put it in the river that's flowing through. So it actually drove more introductions. It was a crazy thing to do. And this is the shocker for me. This is the Burmese python. This has arrived in Florida. This is a picture in Florida. This Burmese python obviously does not come from Florida. And here it is eating an alligator in Florida. These things are massive. And this is like a Hollywood movie story. So the law of unintended consequences is what I'm drawing together here. From the trade, their position is it's not our fault. We sell these things to people and they're the ones that release them. Well, I don't agree with that. I think they have a responsibility to at least warn or advise people. The trade might say, well, we'll use lobbyists to make sure that people don't try and introduce laws to stop us doing it. Another key trick in trade and issues like this is to have we'll develop our own code of conduct. That will stop everything. We can self-regulate. We don't need regulations. Well, this doesn't work. Clearly, it doesn't work. And then when they do introduce a ban, they want to finish their stocks. So they build up a massive collection and then sell the material for 2 years later. It's relatively irresponsible. And they want to be compensated every time, and they will bring their lawyers in to argue. So this is not a responsible behavior. It's a purely commercial, capitalist approach to everything, and without a consideration to the environment. But I must say that industry bodies do not tolerate members that do this, so they are quite principled. But with invasive species, it only takes one organism to escape when you're away, or one pair. So it only takes one person to be irresponsible to have an invasion, and this is a big issue. How do you overcome that? So the response of the public, they release things because they want them to be free in the environment. They don't want to kill them or flush them down the toilet. They want them out in the environment. And they also say, why would anyone sell us anything dangerous? Goodness me, I mean, this is a responsible industry. Why would they say they want this thing is a bad thing? They should tell us. And also, they didn't know it was illegal. So these are fair responses to why should they know any different, the general public. But they always say someone should do something about it. Well, that's fair enough. The problem we see here is that the invasion curve, there's time across the bottom here, it takes a while to establish, but once you've actually discovered you have a problem, it's too late. They're everywhere. So these are issues about your intervention strategy. But funnily enough, the general public, when asked in a survey in England, they were asked about what they thought about invasive species, and they agreed invasive species should be killed, not controlled, killed, if they affect human health. Fair enough. Okay, maybe that's fair enough. 74% said they should be killed when they threaten native species. We were amazed at these results. We thought the public would be very, very warm and cuddly about everything, but they want them dead because they're affecting our native species. So there is a general passion about your own environment in the country that you reside in, at least in the UK. So I come to the end of my talk by talking about the ethical considerations of what I've raised. I've given you a very strange example. It's not like climate change or burning fossil fuels. This is a weird thing. These things get out and do something, and it wasn't necessarily your fault or your intention to do so, but things still need to be done. So you've got the trade rights, the ability of people to exchange and make money from an organism. That's an ethical issue. The tragedy of the commons, that the impact of the invasive species is everyone's problem and no one's real issue to deal with. So how do we overcome that problem? There's the polluter pays principle. Should you be charging the person that sold the organism or released the organism? So that's another interesting question to ask. The status of species. This is the most tricky one for me in our discussions today. I'm telling you one species is worse than another species. So this is quite a controversial thing to say in some circles, that I've given this species a more important status than this other species. That's a difficult thing. And also whether human happiness with a pet is worth more than the environment that it may destroy when it is released or escapes from your holding. That's another big question. Animal welfare and human killing. Clearly, if you have to control these organisms, there's a death involved, perhaps. So you need to think about how you would go about doing that. And the ultimate one is ignorance a defense. Can you really say, I didn't know, therefore it's not a problem? Well, I think nowadays you can't say that anymore. So that's a real issue. And I would leave with the concept that when man reaches judgment day, and if he has a seed, he must plant that seed. My suggestion is that he must plant that seed in the right place, in its native range. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richard, and شكرا جزيلا على هذا الاقتباس من
Jed, for this quote from a hadith, if the doomsday arrive and someone has a plant in his hand. So that reminds me with a dialogue that took place between Khalil bin Ahmad al-Farahidi when he was delivering a lecture, and someone asked him a question. Then Al-Khalil posed thinking, and the man who posed the question, he said that I gave him a difficult question, but after a while Al-Khalil replied saying that men are three types: a man who knows and he knows that he knows, that is a scientist or a scholar that ask him, and there's another man who knows and he doesn't know that he knows, that's a student educate him, and there's the third type, a man who doesn't know and doesn't know that he doesn't know, that is a fool, so leave him alone. So now we have the fourth speaker, Dr. Ali Muhyiddin Al-Qaradaghi, and his CV is very long and lengthy, and he will teach us how to be students looking for the for knowledge, but I just want to mention that he is the secretary of International Union of Muslim Scholars, and he has a he hold and he holds the honor of writing books on verifying Al-Ghazali book of a 10 volume. So now I introduce Dr. Ali Al-Qaradaghi in the name of Allah, and a blessing be upon Prophet Muhammad, his households and his companions and his followers until the day of judgment. Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to say, Your Excellencies, I wanted to address Your Excellencies and Your Highnesses, but I believe that I'd rather and like more the word dear brothers and sisters, so I greet you with the greeting of Islam, so please be upon you. Our topic today is of a great significance. We would like to thank CILE, the Research Center for Islamic Legislation and Ethics, and for the seminars which I participated in for 3 days, and we would like to also to thank them for also amazing lecture, and we thank you for your presence, and we would like to thank you for your interest on this topic, which is very significant. This issue, this topic, consumerism, had 3 dimensions. First, consumerism and the ethic aspect and the treatment or solution. So I will try in the limited time given to me, the 10 minutes, to talk about those 3 dimensions. The consumerism, of course, it means is the extravagancy in buying goods and commodities, and also in services, hotels and other services.
This tendency embodies the consumerist culture. So consumerism becomes a culture for human beings, and that's the worst thing, when consumption becomes a culture. And this is extremely dangerous, and this is unfortunately what we are witnessing in the world at the moment, especially through all forms and shapes of marketing, through the media or sales, reductions, discounts, and prices, and unfortunately even using women in a degrading fashion to promote products. And I really think that this is one of the hallmarks of the capitalist economic system, in giving market freedom for supply and demand, as the market as if the only body that's responsible for achieving justice. But crises, one after the other, since 1928, and then the crisis proved the abject failure of that theory, that the market cannot actually bring about or achieve justice, because the capital is only the manufacturing countries, or there's companies, all those companies and corporations which are more powerful than the workers, and also the consumers are in a weaker position than the producers. And the monopoly companies spend billions of dollars on advertising and promotion. According to a precise statistic by one of the journals, that the toys companies only in the Western countries, and I'm not talking about China, spend every year $800 million on promotion and advertising. There, they can actually consume for the consumers about $30 million for those children's toys, and these toys actually become a problem for the environment afterwards. So this is a tendency, just as it's being a capitalist one, it's related to globalization. The economic globalization and political hegemony, these two theories or the aspects actually dominating the whole world through the control and the domination of the world through the various corporations, multinational corporations, and also the World Trade Organization and others, trying to break the barriers so the small companies in our world are not capable of competing with those major and big corporations. So the big corporations will monopolize, the scene will be left for them. This is a theory, just as well as being a capitalist one, was actually a theory for the pre-Jahiliyyah, for the pre-Islamic Arabs, and recorded in the Quran when the Prophet said to his people, or people of Quraysh tribe, they were proud. He said that you spent an awful lot of money, as in the Quran. I spend an awful lot, millions now of money, and then this was actually boasting. They were boasting of the amount of money, huge amounts of money they were spending, just as we are witnessing nowadays. And one of the invitations, we were 3 people, and we had a camel and a goat, and obviously grilled, and a sheep. All of that. What are we supposed to do? This is a story, by the way, that's written in Khalil and Demna. That's one of the famous traditional classic literary books. So I said to His Excellency the Ambassador, you reminded me of that story in Khalil and Dimna, and he said the lion, the fox, and the weasel, they agreed to have a company, a holding company, and they tried to actually capture a cow, a buffalo, and a gazelle. And then the lion said, what are we supposed to do with this? And the fox was scared that he might say something that would make him angry. And he said, the weasel, you actually called him the wise of the jungle. And then the weasel believed that, and he saw that the lion was becoming a democrat, consulting them, and he said, the buffalo, the wild buffalo, for you, and the gazelle for you, and the actually rabbit is for me. So the lion was very angry, and he gave him a strong, big smack. And then, just as Muqaffa says, and then they reached the cave, and the lion became calm again, and said to the fox, I'm sorry, I did that, but what do you think? And the fox said, the buffalo for your breakfast, you are the king of the jungle, so you have that, and the gazelle for that too, and the rabbit for a light meal. And he said, who taught you all of that? And I said, actually, this smack that I've seen made me learn my lesson. So this is actually the book of Khalil and Dimna has got lots of words of wisdom actually spoken by animals. So what we're supposed to do, unfortunately, this actually ends up in the dustbin while people are starving, dying of starvation. Now, this is our world today. Perhaps the Western, the European worlds have reached some sort of satiety in some areas, but in our world is a strange one. Even within the oil-rich countries, there are lots of poor people. Paradoxically, and I'm sure you know that, but there is poverty. How can that happen? Therefore, now the young people have actually the culture of extravagance in the watches, cars. They're buying them millions, spending millions on them while people are dying of starvation elsewhere. So this culture is extremely dangerous and boastful one. Now, where are we now? Rich people are consuming, this is a report by the United Nations, are consuming, for example, meat, the meat consumption, and they're a small percentage, about 95, and the poor people are consuming 5% only. 95 for rich people. Al-Jarudi, the peasant, the Pakistani peasant, uses less than his American counterpart, 400 times of the meat consumption. There are reports about the animals, pet animals of rich countries are consuming approximately 25% of the world production of food, especially in meat production, meat consumption. 25% for those animals, and 75%, 45 for the rich, and the rest for the rest of humanity, about 6 billions. And in the report published by Newsweek Times, it said that the American cat, one pet cat, consumes 150 pounds of food, of meat. As for the American pet dog, about 275 pounds of meat. But as the African poor, you don't see the meat in the whole year. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, the consequence of that, in addition to the immorality involved, there are serious impacts, drowning the market and the high debts and loans, underdevelopment, causing untold harm to the environment. And there are reports from the United Nations, all are talking, especially the 1998, the detailed report about all those cases, if you read it. Therefore, the situation now, we can see a serious imbalance. There's no balance at all. There's no justice. There's no equality. There's nothing that we can measure for the animals in some countries compare with the extravagance that we see in Arab countries in particular, especially in the Gulf, with the rest of the world. Man, wherever they are, in a human being, Muslim or otherwise, is a man who's got the Spirit of God is breathed into him. So this relation, how is it relevant to the environment? It's a close relationship with the environment and inverse relation and proportional one. If there is a lot of consumption, especially of consumer products, in terms of production, how much do they cost in terms of energy, in terms of gases, in terms of waste? This to start with. And then these things become a tool of destruction, whether it be their toys, what kind of damage they can cause to the environment. Therefore, the environment is suffering. It's only obvious, and my brother Dr. Saif referred to that, and the other brothers here referred to that. So the environment is suffering, and one of the foremost and main reasons, this kind of culture of consumerism. The immoral aspect has got two important issues involved: the damage or the harm to the environment that's owned by everybody. And God said that the land, the earth has been created for creation, for creatures, not for only a certain group of creatures, and not satisfy the desires of a certain category of creatures. And this is related to the capitalist theory, related to the major problem, which is the scarcity of resources and the infinite demand. This requires, obviously, discussion in detail, but an important issue that leads to harm to society. The other aspect of the moral aspect, the lack of human fraternity, the feeling for other humans. Millions of people die of hunger and poverty and disease and malnutrition. So, lack of medicine. In fact, the absence of medicine altogether, people die, perish. And other world, some people actually die have extravagance and diseases resulting from voracity, from this luxury, where the Quran referred that there is mercy among humans that should be preserved. Oh, you people, fear your God who created you from one soul, from which created its partner, and then brought forth a lot of people, men and women, and fear God. And the exegetes talked about the relations between humans, the links, kinship among humans. And this one, Muslims, Jews, Christians, atheists, every human being is related to me. Like my cousin, we meet, and then all together, and said, fear God, who is actually created this kind of kinship, and he will ask us about this kinship on the Day of Judgment. The Prophet, when there is a famine for Quraysh, he sent them 500 dinars from the companions, his enemy. He sent them 500 dinars. The human side is important. The human aspect is one thing, and the war is something else. There is a balance. This is an important moral aspect. So how can they be ignorant of that? How can they ignore it? Very briefly, Dr. Mawla, if you just allow me, first of all, in fact, Islam addressed this issue, by the way, through the following. Confronting deceit and cheating, which is important in consumption, all types of fraud, and also extravagance and prodigality. And briefly, we can talk about prodigality and extravagance and the system of accountability. And actually, as we call them nowadays, the companies or the organization protecting consumers, consumer protection companies. So the markets as well, there is a person regulating the market, and also the shops as well in the stores. They have the popular organizations. They are the civil society organizations, foremost amongst which the accountability and the endowment to address these issues. Islam did not confine itself to these humanistic issues, but dealt also with the laws and legislations, the deterrent ones. Islam actually laid down punishments for monopoly and punishments for cases where, as the Prophet, peace be upon him, said in his tradition, whoever the people of any location, if any neighborhood there is one person who's hungry, then they are actually devoid of any loyalty to Allah, to God. And also if one dies of a locality, of a neighborhood, now that you've known it, this is actually a responsibility, and Islam laid down principles for it. And there are lots of issues related to the punishments, ordained punishments in the Quran, and also the reproach and rebuke, and these non-custodial punishments as well. They have not been identified actually in Islam because they vary depending on the impact of the crime involved. That's why in some cases this punishment might even become execution, capital punishment in certain cases. One of the duties of the state as well, the state is responsible for providing protection against monopoly and against and the Umar ibn Khattab, the Caliph, said, if there's only one camel tripped somewhere, I'll be accountable for the camel on the Day of Judgment. You have to pave the roads for it. So also actually providing for the commodities. Harun al-Rashid, the Caliph, had a beautiful system which is called the law of supply and demand, the positive supply and demand, not the free supply and demand law, which serves only capitalist societies. So what he did, he met with Abu Yusuf and other dignitaries, and in the summer he would determine the price of grains and fruits. Let's assume, for instance, that every pound or a kilo, we say 1 dinar, as an example, or a dirham. And then if the producers in the summer, because in the summer the grains are cheaper, and the merchants actually exploit that, so we buy it cheaply. So if anybody, even the merchants, do not buy from them, I'm available to buy it for 1 dirham. And when they have also the guarantee, they used to have haggle. There was a power that's protecting the consumer or the weak producer. And if they're more than 1 dinar, it's used for trade. In the winter, these grains which have been collected, price is determined for them, so that the merchants will not actually be free to do that. If you buy these grains and these foods for a certain amount of money, they will do, otherwise I'm going to sell them to the market myself. And if everything works fine, in some years, he would send the grains to the poor areas of the state. My purpose here, what I'm trying to say, that the country should look after these issues, the consumerism, The Quran, one of the major serious issues, the issue of extravagance and prodigality. The difference between extravagance and prodigality, and extravagance or waste, I buy something that's allowable, but I go over the top, I exceed the limit. But the prodigality, I buy more of a something. Like for example, for men buying gold watches, very expensive, this is a waste. Or I buy a very expensive car whose handles are made of gold, or something else that's very expensive, or a special private aircraft, for instance, with gold in it. This is actually prodigal behavior. The God said that these prodigals are brothers of devils. And I actually paused and I thought, why God say that they are criminals or something else? The relation between the prodigal and the devil is one that is a negative impact. One of the main functions of the devils is to change the environment, the animals, the behavior. Prodigal behavior affects the traditions and customs of others, in addition to grudges, a social grudge, and other issues. Therefore, God Almighty called the prodigals as brothers of devils, and the prophetic tradition laid down a number of controls for consumption. First of which, that in all issues that there's moderation, an approach of moderation in everything. And God Almighty says, do not be extravagant or too thrifty or niggardly behavior. And he said that the servants of the merciful who walk actually in modesty and speak peace to others, and those who spend not wasted, even when they spend on something good, then they do not go to extremes or do not have a niggardly or stingy. So they are halfway between them, the happy medium, and also fulfilling the needs. This actually hierarchy is very important, that our Muslim nation, we don't have only the necessities or the needs. We are consuming society, consuming nation. And for consumption, first time, in fact, when I went to Germany, I thought at the time, I said, these countries, all of them would drive in Mercedes and BMW and huge cars. And I found only a minority, a few people and the small car. But look at us here. They actually manufacture. They are worthy of it. They are manufacturers. And we are consuming, only consumers. And look how we are behaving. And if there's any limousine, a new model, and then we see them here, we find it being bought here. So the feeling for the others, the sense of solidarity, that the faithful people in their solidarity, like a whole body, if one organ is ill, the other organs suffer as a result. And also for the believers, isn't that a soul? The Prophet actually, the Prophet stood up in a funeral of a Jewish man, and when he asked him, why did you stand up? He said, this is a human being. Even animals should be fed. A woman actually ended up in hellfire, thrown in hellfire, because actually kept a cat for 3 days, locked up a cat for 3 days. So, and another one went to heaven because watered a thirsty dog. So this is the difference between selfishness and the fraternity. Nobody believes in me, the Prophet said, who lies, sleeps full, feeling full, while his neighbor is suffering from hunger. The Prophet said that the feeling of the spending, they actually give others, even if they want something badly, and they feed. Even they have the food, precious food. They feed the poor people, and we say we feed you for the sake of Allah. We don't want any reward or gratitude from you. And the Prophet said, who has any leftovers, they give it to people who have nothing, and they should support others. Abu Dharr said, the Prophet kept on saying it until we were convinced that we have no right to what exceeds our needs, especially if we have an excess of our needs, or especially when there are poor people who are in bad need of it. And there's another tradition as well from the Prophet, narrated by Al-Haythami al-Mundhari, that Allah imposed on the rich Muslims in their money a percentage, the percentage that's enough for the poor people. And then the poor people, if they suffer, the rich people will be punishable, will be answerable for that. And especially the zakah is actually alms giving is given, the charity. There's an important right. If it's paid in full, it's a huge amount of money. I worked it out 2007, and I've got the statistics. In the Gulf countries, $100 billion that actually alms giving, the zakat for them. While in other countries, about 300 billion to 400 billion for the annual zakat for Muslims, which is the obligatory alms giving. And that's through the stock markets and banks and the rest of it, which means that this $300 million per annum, if that's spent properly, especially through appropriate projects, and also the austerity, the culture of austerity is required. We have to seek and try to save money. And this is different. Austerity, you seek with all your effort to make money, but you give it to others. Don't forget the others. This is the top. The Quran, the glorious Quran, arranged the people of paradise of heaven at 3 levels, 3 tiers. Those who enter in the Surah Al-Ma'arij chapter described, they pay the zakat, the alms giving, and they pay from the money, the obligatory alms giving for the needy. The second tier, who enters heaven, and then before that they were good doers, and they sleep very sleep at night, and then there is a proportion of the amount, and they didn't identify a certain proportion, but they give it depending on the needy and the poor. So that's why in a higher level in heaven, if people are worthy, these are the ones who inherit paradise. They have got certain qualities and traits, foremost amongst which is that these people actually whose hearts were attached to making the poor happy. They are working at the university, working very hard day and night, collecting millions, not gathering millions for themselves to make others happy. And this is in the Quran mentioned. Those of the believers are successful who are fear God in their prayers and do not turn from frivolous talk, and those ones who pay the alms giving. Unfortunately, the exegetes explain the zakat, they call it they pay it. When I went to the linguistic books and found the fa'il, the doer who doing the alms giving, it shows is actually physical activity and mental activity and includes everything. So the verb that's used, actually they are doing it, that I work and I do it to make the money in order to give it to the poor and the needy. I will conclude with that. And also the Prophet, peace be and blessings be upon him, was an example to be followed. When Umar went to him, found in his house nothing at all except little. And the Prophet said that Allah is enough. And Umar said that we have the hereafter and they have this world. And Umar, the Caliph, when he went to the Levant and made some food he'd never seen in his life, he asked, what kind of food is this? And Khalid made it for him, one of the leaders. And he said, this is for us. So what about the poor people amongst us who died and perished and have not having enough bread for them? And Khalid said, for them, they have heaven. So Khalid, Umar was in tears, was tearful when he had that. And he said, this should be given, this food, I'm not going to have it. You give it to the poorest people among us. So if we measure from this world, this wreckage, and they have the measure in heaven, then they are better than us, much better than us. This, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to take too long. This is this obviously in addition to the wise consumption. We're not against consumption in general. Of course, we accept consumption, but wise consumption and the Quran, the distinction between the extravagance, and we want to destroy a village, we send those extravagant ones to actually make mischief on the land, and then they are receive a justified punishment. That's what I want to show. Thank you very much indeed for your attention. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
أحسن الله إليك فضيلة الشيخ.
Thank you, Sheikh, and we enjoyed your words, and now we will try to ask each one of the panelists to take some time to respond to what he heard, and now we'll ask Dr. Shaw to reply to what he heard from the Sheikh.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Sheikh. That was a remarkable presentation. As ever, revealing, insightful, comprehensive, as I've been experiencing for the last 2 days as we've been together. It's great that you've revealed our shocking behaviour. The environment is out of balance, and we are out of balance in our behaviour, and that's a cause and effect, basically. And you've highlighted that and the issues that are causing this behaviour, the shocking consumption problems, the imbalance in advertising, the pet consumption thing was a revelation to me. I would remind everyone that we lose 40% of our food from crop to plate. Before we even have this waste, we waste it before we even have it to waste. So this is an even more shocking abuse of our resources. I'm so impressed that you have the courage and humility to draw attention to the oil-rich nations and behaviour as well as the capitalist West behaviour. You know, we're not that far apart in that, I'm afraid. And more importantly, to draw out the Islamic principles and teachings that address almost every issue that we are concerned about. There is an answer in the Quran or the teachings that are in interpretation to address all of these issues. So, you know, it's a revelation to me, and as I haven't said to you personally, but I will learn much more from you than you will ever learn from me, and I very much appreciate your insight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shaw.
Thank you very much.
Right, now I would like to have a response from Dr. Saif, please.
طبعا أنا أحب أعلق على
I would like to reply to what Dr. Richard said relating the invasive and the trade of these animals from one place to another, which have a major impact on the environment. And we know that the ecology system contains of 4 elements: the protective one, and the consumption, and the non-living, and micro creatures. So when Allah has created this universe in this classification, every environment has its own created for its own elements. Some these are coexist in a balanced way, so it's not allowed to move creatures from one ecosystem to another for 2 reasons. The first reason is for the impact that Dr. Richard said, either for these creatures will dominate this ecosystem and have an impact on the balance of the ecosystem, and also on another side, these creatures might, or living organisms, they might not have the ability to reproduce and adapt with the ecosystem. So when we think about trading or moving these living organism from one ecosystem to another, we need to have a comprehensive study to identify whether these creature, whether a bird or a fish, that can coexist in this ecosystem without creating or without having a negative impact. But the experiences have shown that this transfer has a negative impact, and I think with Egypt there's the river flower on the Nile, which had a negative impact which was moved from one ecosystem to another, and up till this minute it creates many economical problems. Of course, there are 2 dimensions here. The first one maybe for trade or for marketing purposes, and despite the knowledge of those people to the danger of these organisms, and might be for the ignorance of this. So environment issues are very critical, so it requires a thorough study before moving them from one ecosystem to another or from environment to another. I believe I believe that I have a problem with the shifting from one language to another. I switch from from Arabic into English and vice versa. So, frankly speaking, this environment issue is a topic that combine several or multi-interest and multi-civilization, and so today when talked about philosophy and and Islam and protection of environment, and Sheikh Qaradaghi has a book titled "Protection the Environment from Islamic Perspective," and we need to actually, so without using my authority here, I would like, and take the microphone, I would like to ask Dr. Nomanul to comment to what he have heard from the other speaking from his field of experience, which is from philosophical point of view and perspective.
I ought to thank the Sheikh for overwhelming me by his address. I think it was very courageous, very comprehensive, coherent, learned, and balanced. To be here, I was talking to Dr. Shaw yesterday, and I was saying that talking about these issues in a society which is known to be highly consumerist is like teaching the lion how to become a vegetarian. It's very, very difficult, and I think that this courage that the Sheikh has expressed must be recognized. The problems with the capitalist system, the very philosophical underpinnings of the capitalist system, he has touched upon. He tells us that a very small percentage of the people in the world consume the largest proportion of world resources. Question of monopoly, question of price control and consumption control, ownership, extravagance, all these things have been touched by him, and I think that it is a bit of an irony that in the most affluent countries there is abject poverty. I have seen abject poverty in the U.S. And people actually dying in the streets in the cold weather. And somehow this is something very, very unnatural. I'm grateful again to the Sheikh for giving it a kind of very learned muscle, this whole problem. And that's all I'm going to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, I think the environment really is something which is extremely important, and it does not really only represent the global dimension. Also, there is the inner personal dimension. Personally, I think for a very long time I couldn't understand why people call certain kind of environmentalists tree huggers. Richard was mentioning them this morning. And then I went to Iraq after about 20 years away from Iraq, back in 2002. And then for the first time, after 20 years, I saw the date palm that I planted when I was a young boy as a shoot. And that date palm became a huge tree. I couldn't feel but hugging it. I really did. I went down and I hugged the date palm. And I felt that I'm really seeing somebody who's a friend, an old friend. And my brother said to me, "Are you not case?" I said, "Yes, I'm just like the tree huggers." So I think what we need to do is to understand the dimension of the relationship between human being and nature and the environment. For us as Muslims, it is rather imperative to exercise this relationship into practice. Now, I would like to open the floor for discussion because we have time for that. So anybody who would like to ask questions, a question, or has a burning urge to vest some statement, please do. If you don't ask questions, we will start asking you. Let's start with the lady.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Is it possible to introduce?
Sure.
Yes,
Of course.
please. Thank you.
موزة المالكي.
Moza Al-Malika. I am a writer and I am the president of Noura Al-Malki Rehabilitation Center for family and kids and marriage consultation. And I would like to apologize for being late because I am very sure that I missed a very valuable lecture. I am very proud to meet with our spiritual father, Dr. Sheikh Al-Qaradaghi, and I closed the center early in order to be with you here today, and also would like to thank Dr. Saif Ehajari and also the prominent speakers here, the panelists, and I am very glad that I made it, and although late, but better late than never, I have listened so some wise words and thoughts. I would like to thank Dr. Qaradaghi. He was a teacher of mine when I used to be a student in Qatar University. Actually, consumerism from environmental and ethical perspective is very important, and we actually suffer from this with this generation, with our daughters and son. I see the girls come to the center wearing a handbag that is very expensive, that cost thousands of riyal. A girl bought a handbag with 120,000 Qatar riyals. Can you believe it? Can you believe it? The girl was very happy. And I told her that, do you know that 100,000 Qatar riyals in neighborhood and in Africa do not spend this amount for months? So I would like to be courageous here and say that we suffer from this, but this actually is the reason of the upbringing. I know people in UK works also with handicapped. The handbag that she bought is only for £2. So that depends on the upbringing of our kids, how we raise our kids. We need to raise them on how to be wise with consumption, and there are other people also in Scotland and other Western countries who do make some fundraising to send the money to Iraq and to some countries who suffer from the poverty. So how to raise our kids? This is critical, how to raise their awareness about the environment, and also something very important, school curriculum, how to integrate environmental issues in our curriculums since the early years of our kids. We need to raise our kids on how to raise them on to save. And the British, the BHS, I think in the 80s, there was a competition organized by the bank, and the question about the Nelson Mandela. So So the winner of this competition received 1,500 riyals as a reward, and they say that will not give them the reward, but they will open a saving account for the kid. So my kid asked me who won the contest. He told me, why didn't they give me the money? Because I told him that the bank wanted to teach you the culture of saving. And since that day, my kid started to realize the concept of saving, and since that day has been saving. So this is a community responsibility. The households, the civil society, everyone has a responsibility of educating the generations. Peace be upon you.
Very briefly, I will ask my question in English, if you don't mind. I mean, I think the importance of education, individual behavior, responsibility, ethics, I think it was covered very well, and I think we are all in agreement that it's important. On the other side, though, I would like to specifically ask Dr. Noman al-Haq, the word sustainable development, because, you know, if we talk about economic growth and the need to, you know, for the future as the population grows and the need to provide jobs for everybody, sometimes I feel this word is overused. So I want to ask you as an expert, as a philosopher, do we really understand that concept very well, or you think, you know, people use it very loosely? You know, everybody's, you know, the solution is sustainable development, which is a very good concept, but do we really grasp, you know, that concept very well? Do you think we understand it, and is it the solution? Thank you.
Well, let me tell you that I'm not an economist, but I think I see the point of your question. You see, when they talk about sustainability, they think about a system that will not destroy itself from within, and it'll continue. Now, if consumerism goes on the way it is going on, it is going to collapse in the end. It is not going to. It is not a natural state of affairs, so to speak. It's unnatural, and the imbalances, both social imbalances and ecological imbalances, are going to be internally destructive. They'll destroy the environment, and that is what they mean. But I think that there is an abuse of this term. I agree that there is an overuse, but I think essentially in its pure form, this is a very important concept. You see, any unnatural state of affairs, it cannot endure. It just cannot endure. Like wars cannot endure forever. They have to come to a stop, or there is an end of people fighting. So this is what it means, that a system that has endurance and unjust systems, systems that destroy the balance, the social balance, equity, or ecological balance, they are not enduring. They will come to an end. And this is a kind of a pragmatic argument to tell people, you see, what is the incentive of somebody not going to the shopping mall and buying another pair of shoes? You try to give them pragmatic arguments, and you say that, look, if you keep on doing it, you're going to harm yourself in the end. And just like the economic argument you give to manufacturers, that is going, in the end it will cost you more if you continue doing this. So this is I think that in essence it is an important concept. But yes, it has become part of much propaganda, on the part of people justifying in the name of sustainability, and also there are many NGOs to develop sustainable systems, and no impact has been seen. I mean, they pay high salaries to their staff members, but one has not seen actually the concrete impact of that. So.
I know Professor Habib by face because he examined one of my PhD students.
Thank you very much for a very interesting talks. My question is, we have heard about the Islamic teachings, which are mainly about the morals against consumerism. Even though we have all these teachings, ethical teachings, we don't see any impact on consumer behavior. And as we heard from the Sheikh, that actually what we see is the opposite. Now the question is whether ethical teachings themselves are enough to change this, or we need to go beyond ethics and talk about laws. The difference being that when you talk about laws, it has to be implemented. When you talk about ethics, it's just prescription without enforcement. And I think probably we have to bring the discussion to another level, which is about laws and regulations and more strict implementation of these laws. Just want your views on this.
$1 million question, really. I mean, we've been here for 3 days discussing all these issues about ethics, economics, law, society, and so on and so forth. And we know that environmental crises are initiated by economical crisis, and certainly there is a need to correlate law, economics, and ethics. And I think we can talk until the cow comes home, as they say in English. But basically, I think I would like to hear my colleagues in just 1 minute maybe on commenting on that particular issue. I'll start with you, Dr. Qaradaghi. بس يعني حتى الآخرين أيضا. بارك الله فيك.
Actually, the Dr. Maliki has an important role in the university. We're proud of her role in the society of the university, and we appreciate her role. We need the good example, the education, as I said, and studying the consumerism and the culture of consumption of the university. We don't have anything at the university for that. Perhaps the answer could come that we do not actually seek the practical sort of education about the moderate culture. There are no deterrent laws, as I mentioned as well. This is another problem. But Mr. Mabrouk talked about the economic development. I just want to read out an excerpt from the UN report. The report says about the report on development that the current consumption, or the consumerism in brackets, is destroying the foundations of environmental resources and increasing the inequality among human beings, and the impact, the reactions, accelerating reactions, the consumption and poverty, and the lack of equality and the environment. These are all issues that are interrelated. And if the current trends, the current consumption trends and consumerism continue as they are now, without any change, without redistribution with the consumers, and did not move from the technologies of environment polluting technologies to technologies producing environment clean strategies, then the consumption rates will increase, and the rates of human development will be affected, and the environment will deteriorate further. Is it very brief? Thank you. The issue of behavior and law actually accelerates and raises the level of application for any system, but in its own right, the educators, whether the family or educational authorities, have failed to convey the information, translate it into behavior. The information is knowledge, is useless without it being put in practice, affecting all the 5 elements I talked about, unless we convey the information in order for it to become a real behavioral pattern. Then knowledge is useless. And this is the reality we're witnessing now. And the faith is no good unless, obviously, it has implications in practice. So the picture to be complete, in order for this system to be complete, the legislation has a part to play. Educators have a role as well to play. Society, actually, at the same time. I've compared our condition with our grandfathers. They had a positive attitude towards the environment, because they lived and dealt with within and dealt with the environment from a balanced point of view. But those ones, we are now more knowledgeable, we have more technology, but they have weakest positive impact on them. So this behavioral issue requires a lot of effort, and I think there is a major grave challenge to us to achieve what we're aspiring to, which requires great effort, especially on the part of the countries as well as individuals and families.
Listening to myself. In my field, you need a stick. We say carrot and stick in English with a donkey. You either encourage it with a carrot or you hit it with a stick if it doesn't do whatever. It's the same thing. You give a big carrot, but you need a big stick too. And in invasive species, absolutely. In ecology, it's the same. In environmental impacts, it's the same. But the best example I can imagine was one that was given to us by our Turkish colleague yesterday, when he said that farmers were stealing electricity in a village to run pumps to run the water into their irrigate their fields, and this was illegal. And it was pointed out this is not legal and it's affecting everyone in the community, and we have outages, etc. And nothing changed. And then the local imam in Friday prayers said this is haram, and 90% stopped immediately. So it's a big stick. I think it should be used if possible.
Yes, I think it's extremely important that public awareness is, I think what Dr. Moza just said just now about developing curriculums is extremely important, how to do it within the society. I remember once before the Kyoto Agreement, somebody was speaking about the American president who appeared in the television and said, please, when you wake up first thing in the morning, don't turn on the tap and pick up the soap. Pick up the soap and then turn on the tap. And in this way, you will save a lot of water. And that's very true. It's the public awareness, of public response. And this is exactly what the Prophet ﷺ was saying when he said, لا تسرف ولو كنت على نهر جار. Even if you are by a river, don't waste water. I want to see the philosophical point of view from Dr. Noman.
I don't know if I'm going to give a philosophical answer, but I really agree with the motive of your question. I have said this repeatedly, that we cannot afford to operate only on the moral plane. No matter how much moral teachings we carry out and try to convince people, it will not happen without translating all of this into policy and into legislation. And I think that this needs, I've been thinking about it, and I feel that it really needs an international initiative, whereby you re-examine the whole economic basis of the free market economy. The free market economy is running into difficulties, and people such as Amartya Sen, the Nobel laureate in economics, has been talking a lot about ethics. A lot. In fact, he has reconstructed Adam Smith, who says that self-interest and competition is the key. He has been reconstructing him, saying that Adam Smith did not separate ethical considerations from his basic theory that we know of. So question of monopolies, for example, the question of free enterprise, the question of fundamental economic and financial system, all these things have to be looked at, and this will require not only an initiative from the point of view of distributive justice, but also with the courage to be able to change one's lifestyle. This is not an easy decision. It's not an easy decision. It's very difficult with all these multiple shopping malls which are open 24 hours and all these new cars and all that. It's very difficult to resist that, and so it requires some soul searching as well. It requires some reflection, personal reflection. So it is both. This is both a reflective exercise, international reflective exercise, and international initiative in terms of policy and legislation, and even listening to people such as Amartya Sen. I mean, he talks about ethics, and he's concerned about the level of poverty and second generation problems that have occurred. So yes, I agree with the motive of the question that operating within the moral plane alone will not do it.
Yes, fast cars. My son knows all fast cars, and he's only 8 years old, and he thinks that I am ignorant because I don't know what is the difference between the Bugatti, have I said it right, and the Alfa Romeo. Please go ahead, ask your question. I think this gentleman was first. Yeah, sorry.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. دكتور محمد سالم عامر خبير.
Dr. Salim Amir, an expert in the Ministry of Environment. The consumerism has become really a problem that requires more than one seminar to address this problem. And now the moral aspect is the real essential component in addressing this issue, because this is a human behavior in the first instance, and sometimes international behavior as well. So we see in some cases, for instance, that in the States, they dump some crops, for instance, in the sea and leave rest of countries suffering from hunger. This kind of behavior is immoral altogether, and I expect that the media have an important role to play in addressing this problem. And the media can actually, if they are directed properly and if they focus on the solutions that of interest to the society, it is easier. It's not that easy, actually, but it is possible to amend and modify human behavior in this respect. So that I rely on the media, obviously, in addition to everything that has been said, the factors that we mentioned, the religious, educational, and all those factors. But I just want to add the element of media. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Khalid al-Muhannadi. I'd like to thank you for your attendance, of your interventions. Thank you very much, everyone here.
Out of knowledge and out of passion, actually.
I just want to say that why do I feel sometimes that it's hot, especially the heat of the Imam, the Sheikh, actually his speech. I think it's hot here. Maybe I'll raise the AC, or I cannot sleep unless the AC is working all night. Can the translator translate the Qatari? Yes, he can. Yes. You're on. He's an excellent interpreter we got. So basically, generally, in terms of behavior, in terms of principles, then most of the time when I have the AC at a certain temperature and I cannot bring it down, I'm not used to bringing it down, so I'm not used to that. Now, I see it's hot here, so I'm asking him actually to put the AC on. So I'm wearing, so now, and then the AC, I eat it in a day, 5 meals a day, each meal of which is a certain size or a quantity, or every day has to have meat every day, proteins, animal proteins. So I'm not I've not got accustomed to other meals. Just as you said, the behavior, unless I brought up that way, then the media, unless I'm naive, and I think the media would help me anyway, because the media is consumer-based, and all the commercials, we see it here. I can't remember the types of advertisements, and Dr. Mentioned, the Sheikh said how many billions was spent on advertising campaign to make more money and make more profit. So some companies, for instance, like the gaseous drinks, spending every day, fizzy drinks, every day, and you work it out for the whole country, how many every day they spend every day just for advertising. So just maybe the bottle of a fizzy drink for £1 or £2, a can of drink. So how much do they spend? All these just reminders. Do we have these reminders? We have the Quran, the religion, Islamic religion, the reminders. But is this a practical reminder, as you pointed out, or just intellectual one, philosophical, moral, educational, anything to that effect? So what is the real mechanism for us that would help us to instill these issues into our children? Thank you very much for your attention.
In the end, I said I will come back to her. Fadli. Can you stand up, please?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you all. I've learned a lot in these 2 hours. I wanted to ask a question to Sheikh Qaradaghi and Dr. Haq. Actually, we discussed this today already in the seminar, and I really would like to share this knowledge with all of you. So my question is regarding the inherent value of nature and environment. So from an Islamic perspective, why does nature and animals have inherent values, and can we call them Muslims? Thank you.
من
Name of God, the ever merciful, all merciful, throughout the past 3 days, and you were with us. Thank you. We focused on the fact that the environment from the Islamic perspective is like a mother to us, because we were created as expressed in the Quran. We were created of dust, of mud, of all elements, even iron, all the elements and the components of the environment. So it's our mother. So if there is a word, a beautiful word like this one, bir, it's used with the earth. And we mentioned that preservation of the environment is Islamic duty, and that mischief, making mischief in the environment was actually likened by God to the fighting. Those who fight God and the Prophet and seek to make mischief on earth, this actually, people cringe to hear that. And the mischief, maleficence on the environment, as if you are launching a war against God and the Prophet. And then there's important issues, actually, that you'll find them except in Islam, nothing more strict for this number one. And what you just mentioned, the fact that whether the environment is Muslim, as we said, Islam in Arabic language has got several meanings, one of which is the submission, and the other one is the the natural submission, and the volitional one, the optional submission. If man becomes a Muslim, they are Muslim of their own choice, of their own volition. But the environment is a Muslim to God, but through the laws of Allah, of God, and therefore everybody on heavens and hence will have to come willingly or unwillingly. They say would come most willingly. So the whole universe is made subservient by God, but through the laws, not the chaos. The laws of God. If you look at the other text, those who reached using the satellite reached the moon, for instance, and if there is any imbalance, any change in the timing, the accurate timing, that would have a disastrous effect on the launching rockets and the spacecraft. So like the sun as well cannot go beyond the moon, or the night and day as well. For 3 days we've been talking about it, and I hope that this brief answer will be satisfactory. Thank you very much.
You recall that I said something about this earlier during our deliberations, and I'm just going to rephrase it, and I'm pleased that the Sheikh also says the same thing, that it is not a question of volitional acceptance, but it is something which nature must follow. Nature must follow natural laws, right? The seed of a mango tree must turn into a tree. This is the amr. This is what I explained with the notion of amr, the command, the law of nature that God has given to each entity, and each entity follows its amr. So insofar as nature follows laws, and laws are created by God, they submit. Islam also means submission. So they submit to the laws. They follow laws, exactly computed laws, and the Quran, in fact, claims it and makes it very explicit that there are computed paths of the moon and the sun, and they cannot deviate from it even by 1 second, otherwise the universe will collapse. Now this sustained system, this is what it means, that it is sustained. It is sustained that every day the sun rises from the east, and planets don't collide with each other due to mutual attraction. This is what it means, laws of nature. And the laws of nature, I mean, if you want to speak as a Muslim, you will say that laws that are made by God, created by God, those are the awamir. For me, the amr is what is the hukm. That is amr. Amr for a Muslim human being is to, let's say, fast in the month of Ramadan. But the amr for an egg is to turn into a bird. Right? And so in that sense, it's subservience to conformity to the laws.
Sorry, I think you wanted to say something? تفضل.
بسم الله والحمد لله صلى الله عليه وسلم على سيدنا محمد. أخوكم متعب الكبيسي من وزارة البيئة. طبعا أنا عرفت هذا الموضوع عن طريق النت، وسجلت الصراحة حتى أحضر للدكتور سيف دكتورنا الشيخ القرداغي والدكتور سيد.
And this topic actually is a huge. It's not something small. So when we talk about consumerism and its impact on consumers and on the individuals, of course, this environment, if the environment evolved, the human will evolve. Hence, the man or the human, there, if we have a good awareness, he would know that this is a harm for oneself. So now, the more production will improve the economy, but will have an impact on environment. And we can see now there are so many diseases that came due to the massive production, and the human do not realize this. So we need to educate the kids since the beginning, as Prophet Muhammad taught us. When we remove the waste from the road, this is a sadaqah or a charity. So this is what we need this is what we need to teach our kids. But there's also another side to that, which is punishment. So all the waste would harm the environment and eventually will make diseases that will harm the humans. And even the overconsumption might also create some medical problems for the humans, like obesity and like heart diseases. So the humans need to be related to the environment and to the economy. People need to be aware of every of their surroundings, everything that have an impact on them. So the human need management so that people would understand this environment issue. Thank you very much. I just wanted to ask Dr. Saif if he could give us a brief about the center that he chairs. My name is Mahnaz Ali. I'm a researcher in the Faculty of Islamic Studies. Of course, the center, the Friends of Environment, is open to everyone, and if you visit our center, we will provide you with a brief about the mandate, and we would like to hear something about the role of the Friends of Environment Center to raise the awareness in the Qatari community. Of course, the center, since it was established in 1992, 23 years, is focusing on attitude and behaviors, because we believe that the behavior make the difference, and since that's of course in addition to knowledge and technology, you might have a better result, but this requires huge efforts, especially in our times, because there are so many issues that and there are so many supporter for this consumerism, because the media is not a solution, because on the contrary, it's one of them the tools or the weapons of the consumerism. So we are facing a challenge, a huge challenge, and I don't believe that we would solve these problems in a very short time until every individual and every household believe that their relationship to this consumerism, and they need to realize that this consumerism have an impact on their properties, in their health, and unfortunately, individuals do not have this sense, and this is destructive. And now, and even with our kids, sometimes when our kid buy a toy, he will break it in 2 days. They do not realize the impact of their deeds. So people start to realize this until they are in danger, until the impact start to affect their lives. We should learn from the previous civilization who distinct because they were not wise and they corrupt and they do not understand and the blessings of Allah. So this is what we look forward from the coming generations to understand the resources and the importance of their resources. We need to. So there are so many challenges, and the only solution is with values, ethics, and behaviors. Of course, the behaviors and ethics are critical. However, education and upbringing, and many children around the world believe or know that rice and tomato are grown in supermarkets and or harvested in the supermarkets. So we need to educate our kids. Maybe we take the last question to conclude. In the name of Allah, Ahmad, my question is to Dr. Shaw relating the species. Do you believe that the ethics is enough to control the invasive of living organism and their in Europe and other, and does the legislations with ethics are enough? And when we move from the theory to the practicality to face this invasive, well, this question alone requires a whole its own lecture. So maybe Dr. Shaw will share with us some thoughts about this.
You've captured my whole career in a question. No. Legislation and ethics will not solve the problem, because it only takes 1/100% of the people to make the introduction to cause the invasion. So no, it can be a tool to educate, and the European Union is currently considering and about to produce a regulation on invasive species. And 28 countries will agree to have a regulation on invasive species. It's extraordinary. But no, you're quite right. In my case, I rely on other insects to control insects and other insects and fungi to control weeds. It's a long-term strategy, but that's a whole different story. So thank you for your question.
بودي أن يعني فيه سؤال.
If there's a burning question, please go ahead. Especially, we have a lady, and I think we'll take her question.
Just want to say thank you so much to all the speakers this evening. In particular, Dr. Shaw, your presentation was more than insightful to learn about plants growing into houses in the UK. My question really is for the Sheikh and also for potentially Dr. Haq. Do you think that perhaps the disconnection with Muslims, I'm sorry if this is a generalization, but in Islam, I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with the Hadith of Jibreel, in which the Prophet ﷺ said that the religion is made up of Islam, which is basically the legal principles, Iman, the faith, and also Ihsan. And Ihsan has been interpreted by Muslims, as by some Muslims as tariqah, by some Muslims as tasawwuf, but definitely a more spiritual dimension of Islam. And you've talked about the insensitivity towards, extravagance and consumerism and thinking about others. Do you think perhaps that is because the Muslim world has now perhaps separated Islam and Ihsan, where once they used to be very, very close together, as in, the legal discipline of Islam and the spiritual discipline of Islam? And if we are lacking in a spiritual discipline in Islam, which was described as the Prophet ﷺ as Ihsan, then what can we do as a community to revive that once again in the materialistic world that we live in? I hope that was clear. Thank you.
Well, I think this question needs to be collectively answered. But I mean, I will start with show, and then pass the show to Dr. Noman, and then the final show is for Dr. Ali. But please, in 1 minute, because we are about to finish really.
In the interest of time and a lack of knowledge, I'm going to pass this straight on to my colleagues. I can't comment on that. I really can't.
Say the same thing. I think that the Shaykh is way more qualified to answer the question.
It reminds me with the football game.
حقيقة أعتقد
I believe that the gentlemen and the panelists were able to respond, however, out of their courtesy and modesty as scholars, as scientists, and they remind me of a beautiful word for Imam al-Ghazali. He said that just the scholar or scientist is just like a fruitful tree. The more the fruit it bears, the more it became humble and more to earth. So the more it bends over out of humility. However, now we go to the question, your question actually. Now the communities, our societies, all of them are separated from religious and from ethics. In Islamic world and in other worlds, people are separated from ethics and they are more towards interest and benefits. However, the Islamic world is still better than the Western communities. Also, we see in some areas in the Islamic world, we see some extravagancy and some violations. However, in general, the doctrine is still the base. And as it has been mentioned, when a sheikh said this is prohibited, 90% of the people, they stop doing it. However, relating to what you have said, yes, we spent 3 days talking about the ethical principles for environment, and among these ethics is ihsan, but not in the common meaning, which is Sufism. And the truth, and there are two types of Sufis: the Sunni Sufis and the created Sufis. However, the ihsan in Islam is the ethical and practical side. In Umar ibn al-Khattab talks, it starts with faith, and then the individual is assigned to 4 worships: is zakah, hajj, prayer, and fasting. This is the second level. The third level, which is the peak, reaching the ihsan. Al-ihsan has 6 meanings. Prophet Muhammad summarized the 6 meanings in the energy that boosts these meanings. Ihsan is mastering things. If you butcher, do it right. Excellence in doing everything. Ihsan is try to do the best always. Always seek perfection. Always seek perfection in every deed we do, in every action we do. So this is ihsan. And it's of a different level. And perfection here is doing the goodness. Allah Almighty likes those who do goodness without waiting for reward. Ihsan means also mercy, even in Arabic language. Ihsan is taqwa. Prophet Muhammad said, ihsan is like worshipping Allah, like you seeing him, Allah. And also to do for our deeds for Allah's sake without any rewards. So this is ihsan. Ihsan is to try to perfect everything we do. But so in every deed we do, in every action we do, we feel Allah's supervision, we feel, and I agree with you, Muslims has distanced themselves from this and turned away from ihsan due to the lack of role model and other elements. Dr. Muhammad said the media, and I said the media is one of the strongest tool. The Quran realized the importance of the media. I've never seen in the Holy Quran al-jihad described as a big one except for the media jihad, which is announcement, which is equal to media. So the Holy Quran has, and I will suffice by this, and thank you very much.
Muslims will soul نفسهم تتعامل مع كل القضايا وأهمها.
And the soul will deal with all issues, among them the environment. So Allah, please forgive us for any shortcomings. Oh Allah, be forgiving with us, and show us to right path. And now there's the time of prayer. Dr. Qaradaghi says it's time for evening prayer, so let's pray together. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.